I suppose for most of you, I don't have to introduce Finbar Cullen, who's Director of the Ireland Institute, the building you're sitting in, so I'll hand over to Finbar. I'm sending the attendance list around. If you've signed it already, don't bother signing it again. If you haven't, could you please include your email? Thanks very much.
Okay, thanks, Frank. Can you hear that at the back?
No.
No, not better?
That's better.
Yeah, okay. Okay, this is the third session of this year's school, and we're here to talk about corporate influence and lobbying. So before I introduce the speakers, I'm just going to speak for about 4 or 5 minutes. I've been warned not to go on too long, so you just have to bear with me, and I'm going to race through this. So, the first thing, what are we talking about? I'm sure the speakers are going to say a lot more, but I have 4 random samples from The Guardian in June, which I think are interesting. Number 1, Caroline Spellman, the Environment Secretary in Britain, is currently promoting GM crops as part of government policy. Previously, she worked in agriculture, agribusiness, and was director of a biotechnology lobbying firm for 15 years. Second one, 15% of the new Conservative and Labour MPs in the UK are from lobbying backgrounds. Cameron himself is in PR, and Craig was a professional lobbyist. Third one, the chief tax collector in Britain, David Hartnett, permanent secretary at the Revenue and Customs, was invited out to dinner 107 times in the last 3 years by big business. And he sat down, they say, 27 times with the big 4 accountancy firms. And the fourth one is from the US. And it says for this year's congressional elections, $3.7 billion is being spent on electing the senators and congressmen and congresswomen. So somebody obviously has a great faith in democracy there. Mitch McConnell, for example, Republican leader in the Senate, spent $47 million over 26 years on getting elected. And Harry Reid, the Democratic leader, spent $42 million. So you can make up your own mind what you think about that. Why are we interested in corporate influence? Obviously because it interferes with democracy, and if some citizens have more influence than others, then we have neither equality nor democracy. But even if we could fully regulate it and stamp it out, we would be left with huge discrepancies in economic wealth and power. And that's what I think people should bear in mind throughout the discussion today. Keep that in their mind, the framework of this. And that's what I want to say in the next 3 minutes, if I can. And the connection between property and political power, and between property and freedom and democracy, has long been recognised. In liberal democratic capitalist thinking, there's always been a conflict between personal rights, collective rights and freedom on the one hand, and property rights on the other, which I would see as a tension between capitalism and democracy. They've sought different strategies to deal with that problem, and just some of them briefly might be interesting to think about. The Lockean strategy would restrict political rights to property. A Jeffersonian strategy would make all citizens property owners, which kind of echoes the recent Blairite idea of stakeholding, and an idea that is coming into vogue in Ireland as well recently. The third idea was a Madisonian one of dividing society to prevent unity against property and privilege. And some of those kind of ideas were separation of powers, federalism in the US, and also encouraging factions and the division of different groups that could potentially come together. I think we've seen some of that in Ireland recently as well. And the fourth one in this scenario is a Keynesian approach, which may be a bit better than the others, but sought to assimilate labour to capitalism through welfare, government intervention in the economy, and promoting economic growth. Now, a different language to describe those things could be class struggle, but I leave that there for now. But the ongoing inability to square that circle, I think, indicates an irreconcilable conflict between property and capitalism on the one hand, and democracy and freedom on the other. And when we think about corporate influence, we should think about how economic power is related to political power. I think we should bear that in mind throughout the day. Republicans found a solution to this in calling for the full democratization of the political sphere. And some of the more radical Democratic Republicans recognised that a reduction in economic inequality was necessary as well. Socialists saw that they needed to extend this democratisation to the economic sphere if we were going to have proper democracy. The thinkers of liberal capitalism like Milton Friedman, Frederick Hayek and others argue that individual freedom demands economic freedom, which they equate with free competition, free markets and they argue that economic freedom must be protected from government interference. Now, to me, without going into the argument about it, it just seems obvious that that will lead only to political and social power for those who own property already. It won't lead to freedom or democracy for the ordinary citizens. The argument is that only the full democratisation of the economy, social control over the economy, social ownership of property can lead to real political and social freedom. So just to wrap this up, what I'm saying is that yes, of course we're for regulation and reduction of lobbying, possibly abolishing political donations and so on, and it's an important democratic demand and an important democratic strategy. But I think we need to build into that an understanding at the same time of its limits, and that, like as James Connolly might have said in a different context, even if you do that, those who own property, who have economic power, will continue to rule us. So we need to go beyond that. So before I introduce the speakers, what I'm asking people today is to just bear in mind throughout the discussion that we're interested in the relationship between economic power and political power. The speakers are going to speak in the order that they appear on the programme, and the first speaker will be Niamh Brennan, who is Professor of Management and Academic Director at the Centre for Corporate Governance in UCD, Chair of the Commission on Financial Management and Control Systems in the Health Services, and currently Chairperson of the Dublin Docklands Development Authority. The second speaker will be Brian Denny, who is Press Officer with the Rail Maritime and Transport Union in Britain, Chair of Trade Unionists Against the EU Constitution also in Britain, and he was convener of Note to EU, Yes to Democracy in 2009 when he ran for election as well. And the third speaker will be Michael Smith, who is currently editor of Village Magazine and a director of Transparency International Ireland. And Michael is one of the, I suppose, pioneers with Conor Huckabee in exposing some of the connections between business and politics in Ireland. So I think Niamh is going to speak from the floor and we'll take it from there.